Princess Diana was a woman who sacrificed everything to help two homeless children she found shivering in a London alley. Decades later, her cruel supervisor at the charity framed her for theft, and the courtroom turned against her, whispers calling her reckless, irresponsible, a woman unworthy of mercy. With her hands cuffed and hope fading, the judge prepared to deliver a devastating sentence. But just as the gavel was about to fall, two figures stepped forward, and what they revealed shook the entire room. The winter of 1985 was the kind that bit through expensive coats and worn shoes alike. Streets in London's East End smelled of smoke and cold concrete, the kind of place where people rushed home, heads down, ignoring whoever was left behind. Diana Spencer, then just 24 and newly married into the royal family, had insisted on visiting a homeless shelter without the usual entourage. Her protection officer, James Crawford, had reluctantly agreed to minimal security. The palace had made it clear they tolerated her charity work, but barely. "You're too soft," her lady-in-waiting had warned that morning. "The family thinks you're wasting time on people who won't appreciate it." But Diana couldn't stop. Something in her needed to see beyond the palace walls, beyond the carefully staged photo opportunities. That evening, after a long day at the shelter, Diana walked back toward where Crawford had parked the car. The alley behind the building was narrow, lit only by a flickering street lamp. The hum of industrial fans mixed with the winter wind. And there, tucked against a rusted dumpster, were two children. The boy, maybe 9 years old, had his arm wrapped around his younger sister, trying to shield her from the cold. Their clothes were nothing more than torn layers over visible bones. Their faces were hollow, eyes too old for their age. Diana stopped. She could have kept walking. Crawford was waiting. The palace would be furious if she was late for the evening's formal dinner, but watching those children, she felt something stronger than protocol. She crouched down, her knees pressing into the wet pavement. "Hello," she said softly. "Are you two alone out here?" The boy didn't answer, just stared at her with suspicious eyes. The girl, maybe 6, shivered so hard her teeth chattered. "What are your names?" Diana tried again. "Eli," the boy finally whispered. "This is Maya." Diana looked around the empty alley. No one was coming for them. No one cared. "Come with me," she said, extending her hand. "Please, you can't stay here tonight." Eli hesitated, but Maya's tiny fingers reached out, ice cold against Diana's palm. That was enough. Crawford's face when she returned with 2 homeless children was a mixture of alarm and resignation. "Your Royal Highness, the palace will—" "I don't care what the palace will say," Diana interrupted. "These children need help. Now." By the time they reached Diana's private apartment at Kensington Palace, word had already spread. Her private secretary was waiting, face tight with concern. "Ma'am, this is highly irregular. These children should go through proper channels." "These children," Diana said firmly, "are staying here tonight. We'll sort the rest out tomorrow." She led Eli and Maya to a guest room, gave them warm clothes and heated soup in her small kitchen. The children ate like they hadn't seen food in days, because they probably hadn't. That night, Diana sat in the corner of the room, watching them sleep under clean blankets. She knew this would cause problems. The palace hated anything that disrupted their carefully controlled image, but she also knew she couldn't send these children back to that alley. The next morning, reality arrived in the form of Sir Geoffrey Hartwell, the senior director of the Royal Charitable Trust, where Diana officially volunteered. He was a man who'd spent 40 years managing royal appearances, and he had no patience for disruption. "Princess Diana," he said coldly, standing in her sitting room like an executioner. "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking 2 children needed help," Diana replied. "You cannot simply adopt street children like stray cats. There are procedures, protocols. Then let's follow them. I want to become their legal guardian." Hartwell's face flushed. "Absolutely not. The palace will never approve. Your role is to appear at charities, not to actually involve yourself." Diana's jaw tightened. "Then I'll do it privately, without palace approval." "You'll do no such thing. I'm ordering you to return these children to social services immediately." "No." The word hung in the air. Hartwell stared at her, unused to being defied. "You're making a grave mistake, Your Royal Highness. The family won't forget this." Over the following weeks, Diana fought battles on every front. The palace refused to support her guardianship petition. Social services questioned whether a royal could properly care for children from that background. The press, fed stories by palace sources, questioned her judgment. But Diana persisted. She hired lawyers with her own money. She attended every hearing. And slowly, grudgingly, the system bent. Eli and Maya moved into a small flat Diana rented privately, away from Kensington Palace. She visited them every day, helped with homework, made sure they had everything they needed. She paid for private tutors when schools rejected them for being too far behind. Hartwell watched all of this with barely contained fury. To him, Diana's charity work was supposed to be performative. Smile for cameras, cut ribbons, leave. Actually helping people was disruptive, expensive, and worst of all, it made him look ineffective by comparison. "You're embarrassing the trust," he told her during one bitter confrontation, "throwing money at 2 random children while neglecting your actual duties." "My actual duty," Diana said quietly, "is to help people who need it. That's what I'm doing." Years passed this way. Diana worked tirelessly at the Charitable Trust during the day, then rushed to help Eli and Maya every evening. She missed royal events. She showed up to galas exhausted. Palace officials whispered that she was becoming unreliable. Hartwell's resentment grew with each passing year. He hated how donors asked about Diana's children instead of about his projects. He hated how the press covered her small, genuine efforts more than his large, empty events. Most of all, he hated that she was proving kindness could actually change lives because it made his decades of hollow bureaucracy look worthless. Eli flourished under Diana's care. The frightened boy from the alley became confident, studious. He earned a scholarship to a good school, then to university to study law. Maya, once silent and withdrawn, became fiercely articulate, passionate about journalism and telling stories of forgotten people. Diana watched them grow with quiet pride. She'd missed royal tours for parent-teacher conferences. She'd skipped state dinners to attend Maya's school plays. And she'd do it all again. But Hartwell had been waiting, plotting, building his revenge. It started with small things going missing from the trust offices. Petty cash, a laptop, then larger items, expensive equipment donated for charity projects. Hartwell began leaving traces. A receipt in Diana's office drawer, a withdrawn equipment log with her signature, forged but convincing. An anonymous tip to the police about financial irregularities. By the time Diana realized what was happening, it was too late. The police arrived at her apartment early one morning. Eli and Maya, now 23 and 20, watched in horror as officers searched their guardian's home. "Princess Diana, you're under arrest for theft and embezzlement from the Royal Charitable Trust." Diana's hands trembled as they placed her in handcuffs. "This is a mistake. I've never stolen anything." But at the trust offices, they found a small storage unit rented in her name, filled with missing equipment, bank records showing deposits into an account with her details. Witnesses, staff members Hartwell had pressured, claiming they'd seen her taking items. The evidence was entirely fabricated, but it was thorough. The courtroom smelled of old wood and judgment. Diana sat at the defendant's table, her hands folded in her lap, trying to maintain composure. Around her, the gallery buzzed with whispers. Always knew she was trouble. Pretending to be charitable while stealing from the poor? Those children she took in, probably part of some scheme. The prosecution painted Diana as a reckless woman who'd become obsessed with 2 homeless children, spending money she didn't have, eventually turning to theft to fund her savior complex. Hartwell testified with practiced sorrow. "I tried to help Her Royal Highness. I really did. But she became erratic, defensive. When inventory started going missing, I had no choice but to investigate." Diana wanted to scream that it was all lies, but her lawyer advised silence. "The evidence against you is substantial. Speaking out will only make it worse." Witnesses testified. Forensic accountants presented bank records. The judge, an old colleague of Hartwell's, listened with barely concealed disdain for Diana. When Diana was finally allowed to speak, her voice was quiet but steady. I didn't do this. I've spent years trying to help people. I found 2 children who needed someone, and I gave them a chance. That's not a crime. No, the judge replied coldly, but theft is, and the evidence suggests you've been stealing from the very charity you claim to serve. Diana felt the walls closing in. Her legal team had found no way to prove the evidence was fabricated. Hartwell had been too careful. The prosecutor stood for closing arguments. The defendant betrayed the trust placed in her. She deserves the full penalty of the law. The judge nodded, lifting his gavel. I'm prepared to deliver sentence. The courtroom doors burst open. 2 figures strode in, confident, professional, carrying thick briefcases. Eli, now a practicing barrister, wore an expensive suit and carried himself with the authority of someone who'd fought for everything he had. Maya, an investigative journalist whose exposés had brought down corrupt politicians, held a recording device and a folder thick with documents. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Diana's breath caught. She hadn't told them about the trial, hadn't wanted them involved. But they'd come anyway. Your Honor, Eli said, his voice clear and commanding. I'm Eli Morrison, representing the defendant. I'm requesting a stay of sentencing while new evidence is presented. The judge frowned. This is highly irregular. So is framing an innocent woman, Maya interrupted, stepping forward. I'm Maya Morrison, investigative journalist, and I have evidence that proves Princess Diana was systematically set up by Geoffrey Hartwell. She opened her folder, spreading documents across the defense table. Forged signatures, falsified bank records, witness coercion. I have recordings of Hartwell pressuring staff to lie. I have forensic analysis proving the signatures on those documents aren't Diana's, and I have testimony from a former trust employee who watched Hartwell plant evidence. The courtroom went silent. Hartwell, sitting in the gallery, went pale. Eli continued, Sir Geoffrey Hartwell has spent 20 years resenting Princess Diana because her genuine charity work exposed his performative bureaucracy. He saw her success with us, 2 children he would have left to die, as a personal failure, so he decided to destroy her. The judge leaned forward. These are serious allegations. With serious evidence, Maya said. Every document, every recording, every witness statement, it's all here. She turned to face Hartwell. You thought you could erase her because she cared too much, because she actually helped people instead of just talking about it. But you forgot something. Those people she helped grew up. And we remember. Eli placed a hand on Diana's shoulder. This woman found us freezing in an alley when we were children. She could have walked past like everyone else. Instead, she fought the palace, fought the system, fought people like Hartwell, all to give us a chance. She missed royal events to help with our homework. She skipped state dinners to attend our school plays. She sacrificed her reputation, her standing, everything, for us. Maya's voice cracked slightly, and when people like Hartwell tried to destroy her for that kindness, we became lawyers and journalists specifically to fight back. The judge examined the documents, his expression shifting from skepticism to shock to quiet anger. Sir Geoffrey, you'll need to answer these allegations. Hartwell stood, trying to maintain composure. This is absurd. 2 people with obvious bias. 2 people with evidence, Eli corrected. Unlike your fabricated case. The trial collapsed within hours. Under pressure from Maya's evidence, witnesses recanted. The forensic accountant admitted the signatures had been forged. A junior staff member, freed from Hartwell's threats, testified about watching him plant equipment in the storage unit. By evening, Hartwell was in custody. Diana's charges were dismissed with apologies. Diana stood outside the courthouse as sunset painted London in gold and amber. Eli and Maya flanked her, no longer frightened children, but strong adults who'd fought back against the system that tried to destroy their guardian. You didn't have to do this, Diana said softly. You could have stayed away. Let me handle it. Eli shook his head. You never let us handle anything alone. Why would we let you? Maya took Deanna's hand. You taught us that kindness isn't weakness, that fighting for people matters. We're just returning what you gave us." Diana felt tears finally break free, not from fear or despair, but from overwhelming gratitude. "I just wanted to help 2 children. I never expected." "We know," Eli said. "That's what made it real. You didn't help us for credit or recognition. You did it because you couldn't walk past us. That's the kind of person worth saving." The story spread quickly. Maya's articles exposed the rot in several major charities where performative administrators had spent years blocking genuine help. Eli's legal work established new protections for people doing grassroots charity work against institutional sabotage. And Diana quietly returned to what she did best, actually helping people away from cameras and credit. Years later, when people asked Eli and Maya about the woman who saved them, they always emphasized the same thing. She didn't save us to feel good about herself. She saved us because leaving children to freeze was unacceptable to her. That's the difference between real kindness and performance. Hartwell spent 3 years in prison. After his release, he lived quietly, avoided by the charitable community he'd once dominated. The trust he'd run for decades was restructured, with new leadership focused on actual impact rather than appearances. Diana never returned to the Royal Charitable Trust. Instead, she worked with smaller, direct action organizations. She spent less time at ribbon cuttings and more time in alleys, shelters, hospitals, places where help was needed rather than photographed. And every Sunday, she had dinner with Eli and Maya. Sometimes their partners joined. Eventually, their children, Diana's grandchildren, in all but blood, filled the table with noise and laughter. One evening, as Maya's daughter asked about the old days, Diana looked around the table at the family that grew from one moment of refusing to walk past suffering. "The palace told me I was wasting time," she said quietly. "That helping 2 children wouldn't change anything important." Eli smiled. "How many lives have we changed through our work now? Hundreds? Thousands?" "Because she changed ours first," Maya added. "Kindness compounds. It grows. Every person we help might help someone else." Diana thought about the alley, the cold, the 2 pairs of frightened eyes. She thought about the choice, walk past or stop. How such a small moment could reshape decades. "The people who tried to destroy me," she said, "did it because they knew what I'd learned. That genuine kindness is more powerful than any institution. It can't be controlled, can't be bureaucratized, can't be stopped. It just spreads, person to person, until it changes everything." She looked at the faces around her table, the family built from one moment of compassion. That's what frightened them. Not that I helped 2 children, but that those children would grow up and help others, who'd help others, who'd help others. Forever. Maya raised her glass. "To the woman who taught us that walking past suffering is never acceptable." Eli raised his. "To the woman who proved that kindness always returns, sometimes as salvation in a courtroom, sometimes as family around a table." Diana raised hers last, looking at the people who'd once been 2 freezing children in an alley, now strong adults building their own legacies of genuine help. "To refusing to walk past," she said softly, "no matter the cost." Because in the end, that was all that mattered. Not titles or institutions or carefully managed images, just the simple, revolutionary act of seeing someone who needed help and choosing not to look away. The palace had told her it would ruin her. Hartwell had tried to destroy her for it, but sitting at that table, surrounded by the proof that kindness compounds and grows and transforms everything it touches, Diana knew the truth they'd always feared, that genuine compassion was stronger than any power that tried to contain it, and it always would be.